everyone and welcome to my channel. So today we're going to be doing a painting of a beautiful little sparrow hawk. It's a photograph taken by one of my dear friends here on YouTube, Jo, and so I'd like to thank her personally for letting me use this work as a reference. She takes some beautiful photos. So I'm going to start by drawing the face. Now this little bird, what I liked about this photograph, it's a different angle. It's sort of from behind, but it shows the beauty of the eye of the bird, and it shows, you know, just the shape of its little body and a lot of detail about the underneath of the bird and the detail of the feathers. So I thought it'd be a fun one to try. So I'm going to start by just getting the head on the paper. I'm not going to worry about the beak just yet. So I'm just going to do the basic shape of the head, and then, as I always do, the shape of the body, the length of the body. So it's 2 times the length of the body. 1, 2. So his body goes to there. So looking at the reference, I just follow the direction of the lines on the page, and then I come down. Now his head also is 1.5. The body is 1.5. The depth. So I'm just going to get the basic shapes in like that. So that's the length of his body, and then his tail is 2 times the length of his head as well, and his tail's sort of downward. So 1, 2, maybe a little bit longer, but that's okay. So I'm just going to draw that basic shape in, coming down and around there. Okay, now his legs are 1 length of his head from his tail. So his legs are about there. And they are also, whoops, just 1 and a bit times the length of his head. So 1 and a little bit. And he's got quite fluffy legs. So I'll draw those on. Actually, I'll do them a bit more forward, the back of the legs there. And I can adjust this, as I always do. I can adjust, you can change things around. I'm just going to erase that line there, because I want it to be a bit further back. And anything I see that I need to change later, I can. You can always change things. That leg's sort of in the distance. And he's got these interesting, like, leg plumes, which is a bit of fun. Now, I'm going to draw his wing. And I'm going to do these in watercolour today. I was going to stick with gouache all week, but I thought this bird is just too beautiful, and I have way more control over watercolour, so I'm going to do my watercolour. And come down and around his wing. Now I've made his wings that long, but they are physically longer. So he's got some longer flight feathers that come out underneath there. And he's not going to be exactly like the photo. Like, he's still just is my interpretation, my impression of what I'm seeing. And it's quite a fast little drawing. So yeah, it won't be exact by any means, but it'll be close. Then I come back and around here. And I can see some of these other little feathers up here. And I'm just going to suggest those. I'm going to give him more of a curled up back. Right, now, his little beak. He's quite beautiful. His beak is, I've got to flatten off the top of his head a little bit. Flatten off the top of his little head, because he's got quite a flat top. And then his beak comes down a fraction, and then he doesn't have a particularly big beak. So his beak's about 1/3 the size of his head. So it's a little beak, and it's got a black tip on it. So just like that, it's a hooked beak. Let's do that, because he's a little bird of prey. And his eye, he's got quite a large eye. So I thought that'd be a fun one, and it's a beautiful bright eye too. So I'll just shape that in. I might just adjust the shape of fraction. Once I add colour, it'll start to look a bit more correct. All right, and I'm going to get rid of that bottom line there. Now he's more of a solid grey. He's got a darker line there. He's got, I've made his eye quite square. It's rounder than I've drawn it, so I shall fix that up. His beak comes back, his mouth comes back behind the actual hard part of his beak. And then he's got soft, I'm going to soften these feathery lines underneath here, because he's got softer lines. I don't want him to look hard, and that's the thing with drawing. You've got to be careful, because sometimes when you're drawing lines, they can look quite hard. So I'll just soften up those lines, break them up a bit. All right, and I can see he's got little fluffs around his tail feathers, and he's got, I'm going to take that a bit longer, and I can see this foot. So I'll draw this foot in. I can see 2 toes and 2 front toes and 1 back toe. So I'll draw those in like that. The other foot I can't see, it's on a branch. So I'm just going to draw this branch in, and I'm not going to do the leaves or anything. I'm just going to focus on the bird. I want to keep this bird quite simple. So I'm going to take this leg down. There's actually a bit of, I'm going to draw this claw. I can't see it, but I'm going to draw it in. So yeah, I'll continue on with this little branch. I can't see this in the reference, but I'm just going to add it in there because I'm not going to worry about the foliage. I'm going to focus on the bird. So now we're about ready to paint. So I'm quite happy with that as a sketch. So I'm going to get my watercolours. I've already pre-wet them. I'm going to grab my little brush because it's not a particularly big painting. I've got a bit of hand towel here somewhere. Just got to find what I did with it. That's all right. Where there's a will, there's a way. I'll use a bit of cloth. Got a bit of cloth here. So I'm going to mix up a grey. So burnt umber, cobalt blue, and mix that up on my palette over here. Quite diluted and quite a light grey. So you can just see that in the top right screen there. And I'm only going to put this around the top, oops, of the bird. Oh, got to need a bit more blue in there. That's a bit too browny. Bit more blue. That's a bit too blue now. Bit more brown. You can just keep adjusting till you get to where you want. That's looking a bit better because he is a blue-grey. He is quite a blue-grey little bird. So now I'm just going to pick up where I started there and just take that paint around. I'm going to wet my brush and just drag. It'll dry a couple of shades lighter as well. Watercolour always dries a couple of shades lighter than when you put it on the paper. Okay, and I'm going to take that all the way around his wing onto these protruding flight feathers down the back here. He has got a couple of little lighter spots on there, but I can go back in at the end with gouache when he's dry and add the little highlights on there. So do that there. And I can just see, I hadn't drawn it in, but I can just see the other wings coming up the back side there. So I'm just going to paint those in. I can just see them there. And now I'm going to go take it down, that very diluted bluish grey wash down the back of his tail. And I can take that all the way down to the bottom of that edge there. Right, now, the underside of him is super duper pale, but he does have grey stripes for camouflage, I suppose. So I'm just going to wet the paper. While that's still damp, wet the paper. And I am going to use the same grey tone. And I'm going to drop in. It had a little bit of pigment on that paint. So I'm just going to drop in the stripes sort of just into that wet paint. And that'll create a mottled effect underneath him. Like that. So it'll leave little lighter patches underneath. So it's not all solid grey. And again, just follow the directions of the feathers. Okay, now on his legs, he's got the same. He's got the light grey stripes. I'll get more detail on those as the layers dry. As I'm getting towards the end, I will add more detail on top. Righto, I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to go back on to my branch, and I'm going to wet the branch. Just clean water, take my brush, wet the branch, and I'm going to add yellow ochre, bit of yellow ochre. So get my brush in there, get my yellow ochre on the page, and I'm just going to drop that into that wet water. Drop that in to that water, let it flow around on the top and the bottom of the branch. This is such an easy way of doing branches in watercolour. I'm going to add a little bit of burnt umber because you can see this branch has got different patterns on it. slightly different tones. I'm just going to add that around like that, just to add a little bit of texture. I'll go under his feet a little bit like that. Okay, and that's done. That is the branch. I'm not going to do any more to that branch except maybe add a darker tone underneath. Famous last words. Okay, so I am going to add a little bit of a greyish tone. I'm going to add a darker grey, just a bit thicker than the watery wash that I had on the bird, just to the bottom, and let that flow up because the bottom of the branch is shadowed. I'll add a couple of little blibs of darker tone just around there. But that's it, done. That's the branch done. Leaving it alone now. Okay, famous last words. Clean my brush. And now his face is dry enough. I can go onto his beak. Now his beak has got a very dark tip to it. So I'm actually used the paint that I just put on that branch just to do the tip. But his beak is a really pale tone. So I might just leave, I'll decide, but I might just leave that the light of the paper. And now I can start to use this one that I put on the branch, the thicker tone. I'm going to take around, resting my finger on the paper so I don't rest in my paint, around the edge of his eye, because his eye's quite dark. It's around the top of his eye, the darker feathers. And we can start to add in detail now while he's pretty well dry. Now underneath his wings, I'm going to use this darker grey. Anywhere that's shadow I can see, because his little wings are out a little bit. So I'm going to just add that shadow under these other feathers and define the lines a little bit more just with the very tip of my brush. Doesn't have to be exact, like I said. Okay, and I can see it also coming down this side of his tail feathers. I'm going to add a little bit around that fluffy bit. And he has got a ribbed pattern on his tail. So I'm going to go back into this, actually more the browny part of the wash. And I'm going to add that little stripe that I can see on his tail, the little camouflage stripe. Pop that on there like that. And I'm going to get a little bit more brown to this. So add a little bit more brown to it and get a bit more water on my brush. And I'm going to go back in underneath and just the very tip of my brush, add these feathery stripes that he's got underneath. Get all that in. And then they go a different direction on his legs because he's got these beautiful little feathers on his legs. That'll, like I said, that'll dry a couple of tones lighter. Come back up under his little bottom. Get that much more diluted now. I'm going to go very diluted to the back. And that goes, and follow the shape of his little body. It'll show the roundness of his little body. So come down and around like that. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. Now I'm going to add just some more tones, like some stronger dark grey to his back. So I'm just going to get the paint that I've already got on my palette, because you can just see his feather markings. So I'm not going to do them exact. I'm just going to use the side of my brush and touch the paper and create a feather pattern like that. Just like that. Okay, so I'm quite happy. That looks okay. I can add some more shadows as I go. So next, I am going to add, I am going to add a little bit of yellow ochre to his beak, but super duper diluted, just to tint the paper. I just want slightest tint on the paper because his beak's not pure white. It's more of a natural tone. So I'll just go like that. There we go. So that'll do. And for his eye, now I'm going to do his eye, and his eye is a beautiful yellow. So I'm going to go cadmium yellow just around his eye. I'll leave the pupil. Oops, cadmium yellow. It doesn't matter. I don't have to leave the pupil. I'm going to go over the pupil because his eye's very little. There we go. And I'm going to use this same yellow on his legs. So use the same yellow on his legs coming down here. It's a beautiful, beautiful bright yellow. And I can see I've got to add a little bit more yellow ochre to that branch just under his foot, where his foot's connected to the branch, just to connect him to a little bit better. There we go. I'll let that dry because I can add the pupil at the end. Okay, let's have a look. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow ochre to the backs of his little legs because there's a little bit of shadow. So it'll just add a shadow tone to that yellow. So it's not just flat yellow. Shadows make all the difference. And now under his wing, I'm also going to add a little touch of indigo. Just a little touch of indigo. Because it's a great shadow colour. And you can see he's super dark just under there. Just in that area there, coming around these bottom wing feathers and onto there. And I can also use the indigo in the centre of his eye. That will be nice. I'm just going to lift that little bit off there. I got it a little bit too far down on his little body, so I'll just clean that up. Get my brush, clean it, drag it out. And that'll make sure that goes away for me. Clean up that little mess that I made. There we go. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of yellow ochre and a little bit of brown just under his foot. I just need that foot to connect to that branch a little bit better. Like that. Okay, just like that. And take that down so it doesn't look like I added that in last. Righto, let's have another look. Okay, so now I'm going to get, I might even, because his eye is so delicate, I might even use a fine liner because it's so little and so delicate. So I am grabbing a fine liner and I'm just going to dot in, because they're ink, they're Indian ink, so they are permanent and archival quality. And I'm going to rest my finger there and I'm going to very carefully draw the outer line of his iris like that. And also you can see he's got little corners of his eyes, and I can pop his little nostril, his little line on his beak. Righto, there we go. Now go back to my brush and let's have a look. What have we got to do now? I'm quite happy with him as he stands. He's a cute little bird. Might go, I've got to take these little grey feathers a little bit, rough him up a little bit, because he has got, I've missed little bits here and there that I've got to just fill in a little bit. But again, they'll pale, but they'll dry back quite pale. He's got these gorgeous sort of fuzzy feathers on his legs that are really unusual but really gorgeous. I'm going to grey up here, strengthen this grey. And I might even go back into that stronger grey, just for the browny grey, just for these feathers, just around here. And that'll mix with that blue and just make it a darker grey, so that's fine if that mixes on the paper a little bit. Just like that. Come down here again, and anywhere that I can see that's got a bit more shadow, I can pop that in now. Just a little bit more here, because that's actually behind a branch. Okay. And there we go. I reckon that's not far from being done. I'm going to actually add a little touch of orange to the top of his eye. Just a touch to the top of his eye, because there is a little bit of shadow there. Just a touch like that. And I am going to call that little sparrowhawk done. So I'm going to sign this, and I'd like to say a huge thank you to Jo for letting me use this photograph as a reference, Jo and her husband. Very much appreciated. And yes, I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow for the next one. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you then. Okie doke. Oh, got to do the 2023 on here. 2023. Get me 3 on there. Whee, there we go. We're done. Okay, thanks for watching, guys and girls. Okie doke. Have a great day. Bye.